Good morning, everybody. We are in the Lankavatara in the final chapter, wherein the Buddha is questioned about what is nirvana. And the Buddha is here describing the Tathagata's nirvana. I think it's important to point out before I start that one can see pretty readily in this the sort of proto-Zen approach. It's actually quite clearly elucidated here. Let's see if we can pick up on it. Yesterday we had the startling revelation that there is no nirvana for the Buddhas. So that's our start. That's our happy shock from yesterday. And of course, we talked that through. And so, but now the Buddha goes on to talk about this no nirvana for Buddhas. The Tathagata's nirvana, and Tathagata is suchness, so true nature, okay? Suchness, thusness, clear light, luminous mind, Buddha nature, you, okay? So suchness. The Tathagata's nirvana, the Buddha's nirvana, same thing. The Tathagata's nirvana, and nirvana here means awakening. It means enlightenment, Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. So the Buddha's enlightenment, or the Tathagata's nirvana, is where it is recognized that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself. The Tathagata's nirvana is where, recognizing the nature of the self-mind, one no longer cherishes dualisms of discrimination. The Tathagata nirvana is where there is no more thirst or grasping. The Tathagata's nirvana is where there is no more attachment to external things. The Tathagata's nirvana is where the thinking mind, with all of its discriminations, attachments, aversions, and egoism, is forever put away. The Tathagata's nirvana is where logical measures, as they are seen to be inert, are no longer seized upon. The Tathagata's nirvana is where even the notion of truth is treated with indifference because of its causing bewilderment. The Tathagata's nirvana is where, getting rid of the four propositions, there is insight into the abode of reality. The Tathagata's nirvana is where the twofold passions have subsided and the twofold hindrances are cleared away and the twofold egolessness is patiently accepted. The Tathagata's nirvana is where, by the attainment of the turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness, self-realization of noble wisdom is fully entered into. That is the nirvana of the Tathagatas. So, let's see if we can open some of this. Recognize that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself. This is the core theme of the entire thing. But it's important that that's understood correctly. It doesn't mean that things aren't there. It doesn't mean that you're the sole hallucinator of all the cosmos. You have to understand it, in a mature adult practicing kind of way. But it's very much like understanding from this perspective that when you're in a dream, literally everything in the dream, including the dreamer, is of mind. Not just that the objects in the dream are just dreams and so really you're fine. The entire experience itself is mind. This is where, recognizing the nature of the self-mind, one no longer cherishes dualisms of discrimination. It's not that discriminating mind doesn't happen anymore, that you walk around in some permanently bizarre state, as some people try to cram themselves into doing. But it's rather that these discriminations and this dualistic mind is not cherished. It's not held on to. As I've been saying recently, the dualistic mind is noble, it's a gift. Without it, you can't come to realization. You have to have dualistic mind first in order to be able to transcend it. But here, what the sutra is saying is that the dualistic view is no longer cherished or clung to, these discriminations. They've been thoroughly examined. Here, the practitioner should know very well what happens when the eye sees an object and the ear hears a sound and the tongue tastes. These things should be deeply connected with and liberated. In fact, you have to see very clearly that the mind does not collapse into clinging or remove itself in aversion, nor does it just drop out in apathy, but actually the mind is wide awake as all of these experiences come and go. The sky remains vastly open as every wave on the ocean rises and falls. Not a single wave on that ocean obstructs the sky to the least. None of them carries the sky away with it. This is where there is no more thirst or grasping. There's no clinging. There's no attaching. There's no fixed self. Of course, in a practical way, we exist in the world, but there's a way internally we might look like we're very unattached. Maybe we've sold everything we own, and we all of our belongings fit into a trunk under the bunk, and we're a monk. A monk with a trunk and a bunk. But it's bunk if you're not actually attached, because you can attach to that. That's my thing. Oh, goof. On the other hand, it's quite possible to have a world full of activity and engagement and meaningful experience and not be attached at all. There's no thirst. That thirst, that clinging, that grasping. I pointed out recently that in the 6 realms, the thirst of the hungry ghost and the thirst of the warring titans is not so different. Maybe different manifestation, but watch out. This is where there is no more attachment to things. Yeah, even that thing. And again, it doesn't mean that you have to just burn everything. Kind of a rookie move, actually. That's too coarse. It doesn't actually solve anything. Now you've got a great spiritual hero story you keep telling yourself. How do you burn that one? The nirvana of the Tathagata is where the thinking mind, with all of its discriminations, attachments, aversions, and selfness, is forever seen through. It says here put away, but I'm going to say seen through. Remember, in the sutra, it talks about very clearly the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, including feelings and thoughts. And then above that is the sense of self, the sort of headquarters, command center, implied self that receives and has all these experiences and adjudicates them accordingly. That's the self. that is seen through. And above that is the storehouse consciousness. And you'll see as this goes on, that's very important to have some understanding about. Because there's something beyond just what's immediately available to the conscious implied self. There's a vast ocean of unseen causes and conditions with seeds that are ripening and pushing and pulling, tethering. This has got to be uprooted. This has got to be seen through. This is great. The Tathagata's nirvana is where logical measures, as they are seen to be inert, are no longer seized upon. I like that one. Inert. I haven't used the word inert in casual conversation or from the high seat in quite a long time, and here it is, inert. Logical measures. Now, what's really meant here is conceptual categories, philosophical arguments, subject, object, reasoning, is not, both, neither. The four propositions are mentioned again later. They would fall in this category. This is all discriminating mind stuff. Okay? So when these logical measures, as they are seen to be inert, what is inert? Inert is like it can't move, right? It lacks the ability to move, or it lacks the strength to move. It's kind of interesting that this logic, even good, solid Buddhist logic, is in some way, the sutra points out, inert, doesn't move. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've heard from Roshi and Dokusan, that doesn't reach it, followed by a crisp ringing of the bell. That doesn't reach it. The logic and the linear, analytical, and maybe correct descriptions are inert. They can't move you to awakening. That doesn't reach it. It can't get there. Often followed with an admonishment, something more intimate, please. Neither of those phrases were helpful at all until they were. And that's by design. Because if the teacher were to just sit there and explain everything at you, well, now it's something inert, isn't it? It went in through the wrong door. Now it's just mental filing cabinet stuff. Insights can never pile up to equate to awakening. We'll see this more. So it's not saying that thinking is evil or logic is bad or something. It doesn't even have to be false. But it's just powerless to reveal ultimate reality in your experience. The map is not the territory itself. Don't confuse those. That virtual AI bot is not actually a relationship person. Watch out. The finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. So, the cookbook is inedible. So it's still useful in the conventional world. Teachings and helping people understand things, what the sutra's all doing for us. But inert, therefore not grasped. They are inert, no longer seized upon. And is even the Tathagata's nirvana is even where the notion of truth is treated with indifference because of its causing bewilderment. That's an interesting one. There's an interesting moment in Koan's study where a practitioner has to confront this very challenging verse. Practitioners do not know the truth. What? I thought I was crushing it. What do you mean, don't know the truth? Yes, I do. I've had a verified Kensho. Bum, ba-da-da. Easy now. Easy now. Watch very carefully. Where is this coming from? And I've said many times, and this is a very important distinction, the difference between what's real and what's true. And again, the dream analogy is the most apropos way to describe it. When you're dreaming that you're being chased by a tiger, say, or have some experience going on, what's true is you're asleep. But what's real for you as an experience in that moment is that you're being chased by the tiger, or you're in front of the class with no clothes on, you forgot your lines, or whatever the dream, whatever terror it is that arises for you in the dream, right? But this is going further. Now that that's understood, don't even cling to what's true. This is a really important point. Because it's so easy to take the truth and make a thing out of it. See, this business is very important. Conceptualize truth, ideas, doctrines. You have to let go of even your own experience. If you take your own experience of Buddha mind and then hold on to it, it's trapped you just that fast. In fact, a lot of descending the mountain training, we call it, has to do with this business of not attaching to the insight and to the awakening. You can't function freely if you're sitting there gauging everything by something else. So even ideas like everything is empty, mind only is the ultimate truth, this is the correct doctrine and I'm on board for it, as insights, perhaps some value, but grasped as fixed ideas, they themselves become obstacles. You think of yourself as a good Zen practitioner? You think of yourself as a Zen practitioner? You think of yourself? Let's get to the root of it, shall we? Self. The mind grasps at the teaching instead of realizing what the teaching is pointing to. Attachment to views, reifying concepts. This is what leads to apparently shocking statements in the koan tradition, like, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill the Buddha. I mean, the first precept is don't kill, right? It's the first great precept. There is no nirvana for the Buddhas. Don't attach to the truth. These are to the logical mind, these are shatteringly strange statements. If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill the Buddha. Why would you say that? That seems like a horrible thing to say. If you understand what it's really pointing to, you bow in gratitude. And don't go around killing people. Everyone you meet on the road is Buddha, by the way, just to be clear. Even the notion of truth, even the conceptual framework around truth is treated with indifference. Salty, truth. I tasted the salt, and I liked it, but it was too much, so I'd prefer a little less. Watch out. Not a problem, unless it is. The Tathagata's nirvana is where, getting rid of the four propositions, there is insight into the abode of reality. That's the is not, both is not, neither is nor is not. It's a, believe it or not, it's a trap that some folk used to get very stuck in back in the day. I don't think that's anybody's problem here today. If so, see me after class. But don't hang on to it. It's basically, essentialism or nihilism, right? I am not. Well, I am and am not both. Well, I am and am not neither. Just cool, dude. Relax. The abode of reality doesn't have to do with these categories. When reality smacks, those categories are not there to help you, okay? Now this one. Nirvana of Tathagata is where the twofold passions have subsided and the twofold hindrances are cleared away and the twofold egolessness is patiently accepted. That is a classic, like a doctrinal triad of dualisms, right? Associated with Yogacara often, but you've got these three sets of twos. But it's important. It's important. It's a very compact and portable guide, actually. The twofold passions, the twofold, really afflictions is the word I prefer. Passion has many positive connotations in our language. It's good to be passionate about stuff. If you know me at all, I've definitely got some passion about some stuff, right? So it's not about trying to anesthetize yourself from feeling deeply or something like that. It's the word klesha is actually very specific in Sanskrit. It's got an undoubtedly negative vibe to it. There's no way the Sanskrit term is going to be misinterpreted as having to cut off something beautiful. It's not happening. So it's like the afflictions. There's no good. It's like the maladies. Okay, there's no good malady. There's no happy affliction. Okay. So we could go with the torments. That would work. The distresses. The twofold torments. The twofold distresses. The twofold troubles. That would work. The dual agitations. The double suffering, dipped, served. Right? So we'll just go with afflictions, though you get the point. Klesha is probably the right term. Some things don't directly translate. But now with the twofold afflictions, there's two layers to it, okay? There's the manifest kleshas, and this is any mental state that distorts perception and perpetuates suffering. That's really what it's talking about. Any mental state that emotionally afflicts us and distorts our ability to perceive. So greed, anger, delusion, pride, jealousy, all of these things and more. And these visibly disturb the mind. That's the first chunk, okay? The second chunk are the latent afflictions. These are the karmic habit energy patterns deep in the storehouse consciousness. In the terms of the sutra, that's how it's framed, and it's important to be able to understand it. These are subtle seeds of these emotions. So just because at a given moment one isn't visibly overwhelmed, the job's not completely done, probably. There's these stored habit energy potentials. They're latent karmic tendencies and traces this habit energy has accumulated since beginningless time. In the world of the Sutra, it's quite clear that over many, many lifetimes, many, many rebirths, or in this birth, in this life, many, many countless moments, there have been so many things that your mind stream has come into encounter with. Okay? Embarrassments and terrors and joys and delights and all, just the whole thing. And one thing about this that's a little bit spooky is that in terms of the tradition, everything counts. So you're sitting there on the phone and those short little reels come up and the algorithm starts pulling your chain around, and you're sitting there, and before you know it, X amount of time has gone by, and your mind stream has actually been subsumed by whatever that content happens to be. I don't think we sufficiently value that. I'm really telling you, be very careful about trading the purity of your mind stream for mindless amusement. Watch out. Be very careful about it. I encourage you to just feel your body and smile and stretch a little bit and maybe read something worth reading. Or just stare out the window. It's better for you. Kind of interesting because these klesha, there's kind of a formula to this. This is a little bit of a side quest, but I think it's interesting. Maybe you will. The 108 afflictions. One. No. But why do our mala have 108 beads? It's actually exactly this. That's why. That's where the number, how it comes. And you have the 6 sense minds, 6 sense bases, right? Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. And then you've got the 3 poisons: greed, anger, ignorance, attraction, aversion, and apathy, right? So if you take the 6 times 3, that's 18, right? And then you've got the 3 times: past, present, future. So that gets you to 54. And then it has internal and external. And that gets you to 108. Rough cut. The numbers work, but the idea is that, okay, you've got your, pick your sense gate, sight, say, and then you've got attachment, aversion, or apathy, and then you've got past, present, or future, and then you've got internal experience, external experience. Anyway, you don't have to get all tied up in knots about it. There's actually the next number is 84,000 kleshas, and it just kind of jumps. It means there's a lot. But the train is important to have some understanding about. Recently I've been using the Yama holding of the 6 realms, and one of the things I didn't really address in the discourse on Sunday is the outer realm is the 12-fold chain of interdependent origination, you see. And it's like this depiction of how this whole cycle keeps reoccurring, and a simple version of it. And that's why these klesha are so important. They're not just emotions, but they're misperceptions of reality. That's what it really is. It's misperception of the reality, and there's always a feeling or a flavor or a kind of a context to it, right? It's actually quite astonishing how well mapped out all this is. We like to think of ourselves as these unique, special, unicorn, never occurred before creatures. We're not. Yes, even you. We're really not. Why is it that the Teisho sometimes feels like it's talking directly to you? Because it is. Because we're all the same. I said recently to a couple of students at various times, your liver's on the right side and your pancreas and spleen are over here on the left, and that's how it is. There's nothing unique going on there, hopefully. Okay? And so when you look carefully in the mind, it's very clear. It is very clear, this attachment, this apathy, this aversion. The mechanisms of your suffering are quite well mapped out, dear one. You do not have to wonder. It's quite clear. And that's karma, cause and effect, thank goodness. So it starts ignorance of mind only, ignorance of Buddha nature, ignorance of clear light bliss mind, thusness, suchness, ignorance of reality, okay? That's your start. Welcome. Let's begin with a heaping dose of ignorance. Go, 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 go. Now from that you get subject-object discrimination, dualistic mind. Right? And from that, you get a sense of self developing. I've often thought about the process of going from being a single cell to being a fetus, to being an infant. And that process, that we all went through, what's that actually like as an experience? You know, at the initial instance, who knows? Some cool things show light flashing, I don't know. But the cell starts to divide. There's no self there yet. There's no perception going on, but there's definitely intelligence that's operating of some kind. But somewhere along the line, a nervous system develops, right? Senses begin to function. Perception starts to occur. Imagine it. There you are. Suddenly something like your brain starts to form. The nervous system starts to get information. It's probably pretty basic, like cells. Pleasure, pain, right? And then gradually, as hopefully nutrition comes along and things develop hopefully well, your senses get more and more attuned. And you start to have experiences, right? And it's like, what is the basis of those experiences? What is the ground within which those things are rising? And so suddenly mom feels very scared and agitated, and so her body floods with cortisol, and guess what? So do you. What's this? And then feels loving and kind. What's this? Without the language yet. Just instinct. But gradually as we evolve more and more, a sense of self starts to accrue. This sense of self-other, right? Eventually, hopefully, you get to look up and see mom's face while you nurse. And you start to connect. And that connecting requires a separation to connect again. And the sense of self starts to accrue. You see? And then this attachment begins, hopefully, in that case. Aversion begins. I think apathy maybe shows up. What is and isn't relevant here? Language comes in eventually. Discriminating mind gets a sharper point on it. These afflictions arise. And actually they can arise well before language, I think. And it's these afflictions, okay, that generate the karma. And that all goes into the storehouse. And it will be played out somehow. And the effect of all of that is rebirth. and rebirth into the six realms. And you can take this to mean very clearly in this lifetime, since your birth. You, with you and your particular sufferings and afflictions, attachments and aversions, having cause that makes effect, that has us rise in all the different realms over and over and over again. And it is from this perspective that you have to understand, and I hope we all do, that even the pleasurable states and the enviable realms are actually just as much suffering. Because the whole thing just keeps going. And in the human realm itself, there are many, many levels and gradations in this realm. It's kind of an interesting thing that in the Buddhist tradition, the Buddha is always depicted as, being a prince and having all the wealth and having all the resources and all the friends and all the everythings. Best education, the harem, etc., all these things. And decides to reject all that to pursue the Dharma. And that motif happens again and again. You see it with Atisha, for those that are in the Lam Rim. Atisha's a great prince, has all the things, and decides, no, I'm doing Dharma. Right? You see it with Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma is a Persian prince, by all accounts, and had the resources and the wealth. No, I'm going to go spread the Dharma. Right? So why does that motif happen over and over? I mean, maybe A, it's literally true, okay. But also, or both, or maybe just B, that's saying that even those in the highest human realm, right, what you do with that highest human realm is you practice Dharma. It's the best thing you can do. There are many of our fellow creatures right now who are in very much no position to practice Dharma. Bombs are falling. Terrorists are terrorizing, and soldiers are soldiering, and on and on. Very difficult to practice in conditions where you don't have clean water to drink, right? And even much closer to home, easily within a 10-minute commute of this point, I'm certain that there are people in the depths of addictive grip, in crushing depression, having one of the best days of their life, living in a fantastic place, living homeless. There's a whole huge range all the way around us. It's just in the human realm. And the teachings are quite clear. If you're lucky enough to have a precious human life, and then you're lucky enough to have the causes and conditions to be ripe, to practice Dharma, you're being a real doofus if you don't. Yeah, that's the word. Happily, here we all are practicing. So, the next twofoldness, the twofold hindrances, okay? That was the twofold afflictions, internal, external kleshas, okay? Next is the twofold hindrances. This is interesting, the hindrance of afflictive emotion and the hindrance of afflictive knowledge. That's what I'm calling it. The hindrance of passion, the hindrance of knowledge. But really, again, it's afflictive. It's the afflictive emotions themselves, the emotional defilements themselves. But to be clear, it's not that emotions are a problem, it's emotions under the spell of ignorance. That's when that's the problem. So this greed, craving, grasping, attachment, anger, aversion, hatred, rejection, ignorance, delusion, the lack of clarity, right? These prevent personal liberation. So the hindrance of afflictive feelings and the hindrance of afflictive knowing. the hindrance of afflictive knowledge. That's kind of interesting. Isn't the game just to know it all? No. Again, conceptual discrimination of self and other. Right? Even correct Buddhist teachings can become hindrance if grasped conceptually. Even pleasant feelings can become hindrance if they're grasped and held on to. Again, as I've been saying to a lot of us in Doksan this retreat, it's not a matter of anesthetizing yourself and not feeling things. It's simply keeping your mind wide open. Okay? Keep that big sky, clear, luminous mind open. Don't allow it to clench down or flinch away or to just check out. Stay wide awake. Wake up. Right? So this knowledge, if you don't grasp it, is not a problem. A pleasant feeling, if you don't grasp it, not a problem. So removing this clinging and aversion and apathy business is what leads to Buddhahood. It doesn't lead to someone who can't feel anything or can't think their way out of a paper bag. Not at all. And then the twofold egolessness. This is the egolessness of self and the egolessness of things. Now this is interesting because this shows up very directly in the Heart Sutra. The egolessness of self. There's no permanent self or soul in the aggregates, the skandhas, right? Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva practicing deep prajna paramita, deep wisdom, clearly saw, clearly realized, clearly actualized that all five skandhas are empty. Form, sensation, perception, mental reaction, consciousness, these are the skandhas, these are the heaps. These mental processes, these experiential processes, they're dependent on other conditions. They don't self-exist. This is egolessness of self. There is no substance in the aggregates. But egolessness of things, the constituents of reality themselves, the expressions, also have no self-nature. They are interdependently arisen, they're mind-constructed, they're a result of organ of perception, object of perception, consciousness of that perception. And it's interesting because our sutra says, Shariputra, all things are essentially empty. Egolessness of self, egolessness of things. Clearly saw all five skandhas are empty. Form is no other than emptiness. Emptiness no other than form. Exactly. Sensation, exactly emptiness. Perception, emptiness. Emptiness is perception. Mental reaction, that's the feelings and the thoughts. Consciousness itself are likewise like this. Egolessness of self. And then right away, Shariputra, all things are essentially empty. Egolessness of things. What about them? Unborn. Not born. Not destroyed. Not stained, not pure, without loss, without gain. Egolessness of things. It's not outside you, folks. But it says that this twofold egolessness is patiently accepted. That's kind of an interesting note. Patiently accepted. I think actually training in the Buddha Dharma is a matter of accustomizing oneself to the Buddha Dharma. One has to become accustomed to the practice. You have to kind of get used to it. Suzuki Roshi famously pointed to, it's like walking in the fog. You gradually get soaked through and through. And this is why coming into the context and container and form of Sesshin is so necessary for those who would do this work. You're not going to get accustomed to this by thinking about it once in a while and keeping everything on your ego's terms. It's not going to happen. It can't happen. There's too many enticing ways for you to keep curating your experience to feed into your own desire. And you won't see it. You won't. That's why we have to come together and we have to make decisions about how we're going to be together. We're going to wear the robes and fill the seat and clean the cushion this way for a very small amount of time in the span of hopefully a very long and beautiful life. Would you just give up control for a minute? Just for like a day. Can we not control everything around us? Or more significant, can you stop trying to? Right? Can you actually just enter into the flow and accommodate yourself, acclimate yourself, accustomize yourself to the Buddha Dharma on the Buddha Dharma's own terms? No one's trying to dominate you or control you or any of this. It's simply a matter of the lineage handing us this gift. Take a break from yourself, shall you? Here. Well, I'm going to take a break by, I'm going to read my favorite book, I'm going to watch my favorite show, I'm going to drink my favorite drink, I'm going to play my favorite tune, I'm going to go for a walk on my favorite trail. I mean, sounds good. But you're not going to come to Kensho like that. Kensho certainly won't interfere with any of that. But we actually have to accustomize ourselves to the truth of egolessness. And that's a seriously intense thing to set yourself to do, to really do this in a way that would be recognizable by any of the lineage holding ancestors from Bodhidharma to today. And you can do that. That can happen. To function at that level of clarity of the human mind, of universal mind in Buddha nature. And then, interestingly enough, it's important then that you leave this structure and go back into the world where everything is chaotic and tailored by you to just the way you want it to be. And go ahead and rub it in now. See if you can get this to show up there. If you can practice there, you can practice anywhere. But you learn to practice here. If you can't practice here, you can't practice anywhere. This is everything is wind in the sails for you. Everything is just lined up and pre-chewed. It's colored by numbers, man. Here, just do the thing. It's so clear. Where else in life is it so clear? Usually the only places in life where it's this clear is crisis. Do you know what I'm saying? Like when something's really going wrong, it can get extraordinarily clear. And then after the crisis, then everything kicks in. What was that, right? come into Sesshin and you take the high seat of practice. You don't have to corral yourself into a crisis. You simply have to relax and pay attention. Whatever your practice is, really do that. That is the total path. So this patient acceptance of the twofold egolessness, this counsel is here in the Sutra for a reason. It's very destabilizing, it can be. This encountering of no self. I'm not saying inherently is, but it can be. The Heart Sutra carries this theme along. It says, since there's nothing to attain, because it's just a matter of realizing what's inherent, and there's no one there to begin with, Bodhisattva lives by prajnaparamita with no hindrance in the mind. No hindrance, therefore no fear. What's that talking about? Is that just like, I'm not afraid, I'll go, I'll eat it? No, some things you should be afraid of. It's talking about fear of dharma, fear of egolessness, of confronting your true nature. That's what it's actually really talking about. And it comes right from this line, I think, I would say. This patient acceptance. There's no self. There's no inherent reality in things. All conceptual scaffolding actually drops away, if you're lucky. This heartbreak, if you're lucky, your heartbreak, my teacher speaks of, it's not just having a bad day. Everybody has that. Who are you? Are you? You? There are even many advanced practitioners, and by some measure advanced, that have some intellectual understanding of this business, but really fear the implications enough to keep it safely in a conceptual container. And that's not acceptable. Only when this insight is fully accepted and internalized does awakening actually stabilize. And let's be very clear, this awakening has got to stabilize for it to be of use to you. It can't just happen in these little flashes and flecks, and then you keep bottling those and trying to carry them around with you. That's not what it looks like. That's not it. It comes in flashes and experiences and moments. And then if your training is solid, you learn to savor and appreciate, but immediately let go of, because guess what? Now is now. And this is why we have to be very careful, actually. This is why Doan Roshi and I are very careful about these wisdom teachings. Because this destabilizing non-self-realization is quite freeing and quite joyful and necessary for awakening. And yet there are many folks for whom this teaching would not be a good maneuver right now. I remember a long time ago, I forget where it was I was reading this, but the Dalai Lama was talking about this, and he had this thing when a Tibetan, this is early on, when a Tibetan refugee of the diaspora would successfully cross the line and get over to India with their life, he made it a point to meet with every single one of them. And so there was a particular person that came in, and His Holiness described that the person asked for teachings, which is, a natural enough thing to ask for, And the Dalai Lama just went right into wisdom teachings with this person. And the person began to shake and have a lot of fear and became very, very concerned. And the Dalai Lama suddenly noticed what was going on and said, "What's happening?" and the person couldn't even really explain what was going on to them. But the Dalai Lama forgot the guidance. You have to have the teachings be appropriate to the karma, causes, and conditions of the person. It's a really strong medicine, folks. It's important to appreciate it. So this is not like the kind of thing where you want to just grab everybody you can think of and pull them in the zendo and sit them down. Everybody for whom it's a good fit, maybe. But even folks like that, accruing merit and being in the field of practice and gradually accustoming oneself to Dharma, this can be very useful. Teachings like on generosity and virtue and patience, right, and joyful effort. These are just as important and just as deep and just as true. But when it comes to this business of actual realization, this turning about has got to occur, and it's got to stabilize. Zen is, well, it's the next line. This is where the Tathagata Nirvana is where, by the attainment of the turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness, self-realization of noble wisdom is fully entered into. That is the nirvana of the Tathagatas. This is not philosophical conclusions. The Tathagata's nirvana, awakening, real awakening, is where, by the attainment of the turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness, the self-realization, self-realized noble wisdom is fully entered into and stabilized. That is the nirvana of the Tathagatas. Bodhidharma, bringing this sutra with him from India up into China, as the tradition tells us, said it this way: Zen is, the Tathagata's nirvana is, direct transmission outside any scripture. It is beyond words and letters. It is a direct pointing to mind and the realization of human Buddhahood. And I've changed the language there a little bit. The tradition is direct pointing to human mind and realization of Buddhahood. But there's nothing in the sutra that says direct realization of human mind per se. It says realization of mind, universal mind, Buddha mind, clear light, infinite love, compassion mind. In other words, mind. And the realization of Buddhahood, let's be very clear, human Buddhahood. That's what you can hit in this life. Please do. This business about being beyond words and letters. Be careful about listening to talks about the Lankavatara Sutra. Watch out. Let the Teisho be a light to your heart. But don't grasp and cling to these things. If they do their work for you, they inspire and inform and direct to some degree your actual practice and experience. And in that actual practice and experience, not knowing is the most intimate. So close the gap. Let yourself really connect deeply, so deeply that you're not even connecting to it anymore. Simply relax. Open the hand of thought. Allow your true self to simply be what spontaneously and naturally rises. You don't need to do anything, but you do need to stay awake after you've woken up.